Daniel said. "Why is my name on this?" The words froze in his throat as the email subject line stared back at him like a loaded gun. The dim glow of his monitor painted his face pale, while rows of encrypted attachments piled across the screen like bricks in a wall closing in. His office cubicle, once dull and predictable, now pulsed with menace as if the air itself knew the secret it carried. A slip of the mouse revealed spreadsheets laced with insider trades, profits spiking before news ever broke. Daniel whispered, "This can't be real." Yet the names were real, the timestamps exact, and his initials embedded in the approval chain. He leaned closer, scanning for a mistake, for some cruel coincidence, but the silence offered no defense. His hand trembled, coffee cup rattling against the desk, heart hammering so loudly he swore it would summon someone to his corner. He thought of his daughter asleep at home, the rent already late, and the promises he had made to her mother. Survival screamed at him to close the window, delete the files, pretend he never saw. But the screen stayed open, glowing like a spotlight, daring him to act. He muttered, "They'll bury me for this," as footsteps echoed down the hall, closer with every beat. Daniel exited the cubicle with his nerves buzzing like exposed wires, heading toward the turnstile where he swiped his badge. The green light that always flickered without thought now turned red, sharp and unforgiving. He said, "No, not tonight," pressing harder as if force could rewrite the system. The machine beeped again, colder, final. Behind him, the hum of office servers continued like a mechanical heartbeat, indifferent to his panic. His chest tightened as a coworker glanced his way, eyes darting quickly to avoid connection. He tried again, hand slick, but the barrier stood still. For the first time, the building rejected him, erasing years of loyalty in a flash of red. He whispered, "They already know." Fear shot through his spine, a realization heavier than the locked gate itself. Around him, the sterile lobby gleamed with polished marble, security cameras blinking like unblinking eyes. He wanted to run, but his legs rooted to the floor. The silence screamed louder than alarms, every second dragging him closer to exposure. In that moment, the whistleblower was no longer an employee, but a trespasser in a place he once called his second home. Daniel returned to his desk, but whispers floated around him like smoke. A colleague looked up, eyes wide, then quickly buried themselves in their screen. He muttered, "They've already turned on me." The office felt altered, not by layout, but by silence thick with judgment. Conversations broke the moment he neared, like shutters slamming shut. The hum of printers, the click of keyboards, once harmless, now rang like hammers in his ears. Each gesture carried suspicion, every nod a warning that he had stepped outside invisible lines. He forced himself to sit, fingers shaking above the keys, pretending to work while eyes burned from unseen corners. The betrayal of colleagues cut deeper than the badge denial. These were people he had shared coffee with, laughed with, trusted in late-night deadlines. Now their silence condemned him louder than words. He whispered, "I'm already a ghost here." And for the first time his cubicle felt like a cell. Daniel's panic sharpened into survival as he quickly saved attachments to a flash drive. Each click echoed louder than footsteps, like chisels carving his own grave. He said, "Just one copy, then gone." His hands shook, sweat dripping onto the keyboard, making the letters blur. The files loaded slowly, progress bar creeping forward like a noose tightening. He glanced over his shoulder at every sound, every whisper of air through vents, convinced someone would appear. The monitor's glow reflected in his eyes, wild with fear and defiance. He muttered, "If they erase me, I won't go quietly." His reflection on the screen looked older, broken by stress, yet unyielding. The drive blinked as data poured in, secrets filling plastic and metal. For a moment, the world narrowed to progress bars and pounding heartbeats, both racing toward collapse. Daniel froze as he realized the glow wasn't just from his screen. A faint shadow moved across the frosted glass of the office door. His throat tightened, pulse racing like a trapped bird. He whispered, "They're here." Every instinct screamed to hide, but there was nowhere. The files finished transferring with a soft ding that cut through the silence like a gunshot. His hand shot to yank the drive free, shoving it into his pocket as the handle turned. He ducked lower, pretending to shuffle papers, as if normalcy could shield him. The shadow lingered, then slowly retreated, footsteps fading into the corridor. Relief came sharp and bitter, leaving him shaking. He thought, they'll never stop watching now. The fear wasn't just the files, but the knowledge that he had crossed a line he couldn't step back from. Daniel walked into the small apartment, greeted by the faint smell of reheated noodles and the soft hum of a cartoon on the TV twi. His daughter looked up, eyes wide with joy before narrowing into suspicion at his pale face. She asked, "Did work hurt you again?" He forced a smile, lowering himself onto the couch, wrapping his arm around her tiny shoulders. The TV's glow painted both of them in shifting blues and reds, as if their world itself was unstable. He whispered, "Daddy just had a long night." She leaned against him, believing him in the way only children can. The sound of the lock clicking behind them when his sister entered tightened his chest. She saw the fatigue etched into his features and frowned, but said nothing, only setting down a bag of groceries heavier than her paycheck should allow. The apartment felt too small for the lies he was dragging inside. He thought, if I fall, they fall with me, a truth that pressed harder than the weight of any secret. Dinner was quiet, except for the scrape of forks against chipped plates. Daniel's daughter played with noodles, her eyes darting to him, sensing storms even if she couldn't name them. His sister finally broke the silence, asking, "What aren't you telling us?" His pulse stuttered as if her words reached through the walls of his chest. He muttered, "It's complicated." She shook her head, frustration written on her tired face. The air between them grew heavy, as though even the table wanted to collapse under unspoken truths. He tried to redirect, asking about her day, but the words felt brittle, like paper crumbling. The hum of the fridge filled the silence, reminding him of everything they lacked. His daughter whispered, "You'll be okay, right?" Her words landed like stones, pinning him in place. He wanted to promise, but promises now felt like traps. He pressed his fork against his plate, unable to look at either of them, fearing they would see the truth written in his trembling hands. Later that night, Daniel sat alone on the balcony, city lights flickering like indifferent stars. The cold air bit at his skin, but inside he felt only fire, restless and consuming. He whispered, "How do I keep them safe?" The question was swallowed by the night, but it lingered in his chest like smoke. Behind him, the sliding glass door reflected his silhouette, a double image of a man and his shadow, each trapped in separate prisons. He clenched his fists until his knuckles burned white, memories of laughter and late-night promises flashing like film reels spliced with dread. His daughter's face rose in his mind, innocent and trusting, a reminder that his choices were no longer his alone. He thought, truth is a weapon but also a curse. The city hummed below, neon signs flickering against the sky, while somewhere in its heart, people traded lives for numbers. He gritted his teeth, knowing silence could destroy them, but exposure could end them all. Daniel stared at the old photo on his nightstand, a memory of when he first joined the company. His younger self smiled, full of hope, tie too big, hair neatly combed. He muttered, "What happened to that man?" The question echoed louder than his heartbeat. He remembered his first day, the buzz of ambition, the pride in telling his family he had made it. He wanted to believe in something bigger than himself, but that dream now lay poisoned, tangled in numbers and lies. He touched the frame, fingers trembling, as though the image might answer back. The silence mocked him. His reflection in the glass was no longer that young man, but a weary face, eyes shadowed by fear. He whispered, "Maybe he died long before tonight." The truth stung. The man he became was a ghost of that promise. Sleep would not come. Daniel lay staring at the cracked ceiling, each blemish a reminder of fragile stability. His mind replayed the files, the red denial light, the whispers looping like a cruel film. He said, "If I walk away, they win." His chest tightened, caught between terror and resolve. His daughter's laughter echoed faintly from memory, cutting through the noise, a small anchor holding him above the storm. He rolled over, staring at the alarm clock, glowing in the dark, the numbers marching forward as though mocking his paralysis. Sweat clung to his skin, sheets twisted around his legs like restraints. He thought, if I act, I burn. If I stay silent, I drown. Both choices reeked of ruin, but one offered a sliver of dignity. He whispered, no turning back, the words trembling, fragile, yet more solid than any wall around him. Daniel walked into HR as if stepping onto thin ice, the conference room chilled by recycled air and polite smiles. Victoria said, "This is a routine check-in," and the lie rang like a cracked bell. He sat, hands folded to hide the shaking, while a folder with his name arrived like a verdict. She said, "We've seen unusual access on your account," and slid printouts across gleaming glass. He answered, "I was reconciling reports," keeping his voice steady while panic scraped his ribs. The wall clock ticked with surgical precision, cutting minutes into clean wounds. Victoria said, "You value your position, yes?" And the question coiled like wire around his throat. He forced a nod that felt like a confession. She said, "Let's keep this contained," smiling without warmth, and the room shrank by an inch. He pictured his daughter's lunchbox, and the rent notice waiting like a judge. He said, "I understand," and tasted the iron weight of the words as if they were swallowing him first. Back on the floor, conversation shifted like a flock avoiding a hawk. Daniel said, "Morning," and chairs scraped as if pushed by a breeze only he could feel. Screens bloomed with sudden urgency whenever he passed. He placed his coffee down and heard whispers clamp shut, lids on boiling pots. A teammate said, "Big day," without looking up, and the words arrived prepackaged in plastic. He typed slowly, counting breaths, measuring each keystroke as if it might explode. Someone laughed 2 rows over, then strangled the sound before it reached him. He said, "Status by noon," to no one in particular, trying to animate a corpse called normal. The overhead lights hummed with the energy of a lie stretching to cover a city. He felt the office retract, an organism sealing a wound with him trapped inside. He whispered, "I won't disappear," and pressed send on an email he knew they were already reading. The archive room smelled like dust and panic. Daniel said, "Just 5 minutes," and slipped inside, heart hitching on each hinge squeak. Boxes were stacked like mute jurors, labels smudged by time and denial. He pulled a folder and found a page clipped short, a sentence cut mid-breath. He whispered, "Where's the rest?" and reached deeper for the thread. A shredder basket overflowed with pale confetti, dates and names turned into snow. He said, "They're cleaning the blood," and the thought burned him with its precision. A spreadsheet printout carried edits in a pen that wasn't his, initials forged with confident loops. He held the paper up to the bare bulb and watched the lie cast a crisp shadow. Footsteps passed the door, a pause, then silence, stretching like a tripwire. He slid the page inside his jacket and told himself it was evidence, not an anchor. Home brought no mercy, only fluorescent truth. His sister said, "You need to stop before they break you," setting keys down like a gavel. He answered, "If I stop, they win," and the line tasted noble and reckless at once. She paced the narrow kitchen, counting risks on her fingers like unpaid bills. He said, "People lost savings because of this," and felt the old heat rise behind his ribs. She shot back, "People will lose you," and the words cracked open the room. The fridge hummed a tired note as if tired of keeping anything fresh. He touched the counter for balance and found only cold laminate. His daughter peered from the hallway clutching a sketchbook, eyes too wide to belong tonight. He said, "It'll be okay," and the promise landed wobbling on thin ice. His sister whispered, "Then make it true," and turned away so he would not see her fear. Night pressed close like a hand over his mouth. Daniel sat at his desk, the apartment quiet except for the tick of a cheap clock and distant sirens. He said, "Trust is a currency I can't afford," and opened logs he had copied. Each line of data glimmered like a lighthouse and a trap. I demand you all. He cross-checked trades against rumors, against launch dates, against headlines that had arrived too early. He whispered, "It fits," and wished it didn't. The cursor blinked as if impatient with his fear. He drafted a timeline that stitched events into a wound, with edges too straight to be luck. A car idled outside, then moved on, leaving a smear of engine noise on the air. He saved 3 versions and hid 2, praying redundancy could fend off erasure. He said, "Tomorrow, I push further and let the screen go dark," while the room kept watching. Marcus found Daniel by the elevator bank and spoke softly. "You look hunted." Daniel studied the chrome doors and saw his face fracture in the reflection. Marcus said, "I can help you sort the logs." Relief rose like steam, thin but warm. Daniel answered, "Why would you risk it?" The corridor exhaled recycled air that smelled like photocopier heat and stale fear. Marcus said, "Because bad math ruins people," and his eyes held a steadiness that felt borrowed. They walked toward the break room where the lights hummed like fluorescent bees. Daniel whispered, "They flagged my access," and the words clanged like dropped cutlery. Marcus nodded and slid a thumb drive across the counter, a quiet offering with sharp edges. Daniel said, "If this goes wrong, I'm Ash." Marcus replied, "If it goes right, they are." The elevator chimed and no one stepped out, as if the building itself changed its mind. They hid in a quiet analytics pod and opened mirrored logs that shouldn't exist. Marcus said, "These trades shadow press leaks by precisely 90 minutes. Daniel felt the pattern settle like a trap snapping shut. He whispered, "It's orchestrated." Graphs rose and fell with the grace of crime wearing perfume. Marcus said, "Back-end notes mention Project Cobalt," and he tapped a line with a pen that rattled. Daniel answered, "That's a blackout list," and heat crept up his neck. He overlaid dates and watched the curve align into a confession without words. Marcus said, "Someone upstream is feeding signals," and the hum of servers deepened like thunder far off. Daniel whispered, "Show me the approvals," and the screen bloomed with signatures arranged like a staircase to a locked door. Marcus said, "You keep the copy. I'll pull more after hours." The cursor blinked with the impatience of truth. The more they mapped, the stranger Marcus's precision became. Daniel said, "How did you know to mirror the logs?" Marcus smiled thinly and answered, "Old habit." A spreadsheet surfaced with comments written in a style Daniel recognized but couldn't place. He whispered, "Where did you get this template?" Marcus said, "Internal forum," too quickly. Daniel dragged a filter and found a hidden column with approvals routed through a shadow queue. He said, "Only compliance leadership can see this path." Marcus replied, "Or anyone they trust," and his jaw flexed like a warning light. A memo pinged in Daniel's inbox from Victoria, the subject sterile and sharp eye. He muttered, "Routine audit follow-up," and felt the floor tilt. Marcus closed his notebook with neat finality and said, "We should pause." The word thudded, as if it knew about the knife waiting behind the curtain. Security called Daniel to a glass conference room that reflected every flaw. Victoria said, "Let's keep this brief," with a smile that filed teeth to points. A second chair was occupied by Marcus, posture neat, eyes unreadable. Daniel said, "You invited him?" Victoria slid a printout showing his mirrored pulls, time-stamped with surgical cruelty. She said, "An internal tip allowed us to catch this early." Marcus kept his gaze on the table as if contrition might appear there. Daniel whispered, "You tipped them," tasting copper in his mouth. Victoria said, "We protect our people," which meant something else entirely. The room tightened until the glass felt like it bowed inward. Daniel answered, "Your people are the ones taking the cut." Victoria's smile didn't move, but the air dropped 10 degrees. They released him without escort, which felt like a dare. The hallway stretched, carpet swallowing sound like fresh snow. Daniel said, "You were my friend," and the words hung behind him like a coat left on the wrong chair. Marcus answered, "I chose survival, voice flat enough to pass any test. Daniel walked to the stairwell where the air smelled of dust and old paint. He whispered, "Then let me choose mine." Down 2 flights, he stopped and pulled the hidden drive from his shoe. The plastic felt warmer than his skin. He said, "You can choke on your secrets to no one and everyone." Outside, the storm cleaned the city with a violence that almost looked kind. He stepped into the rain and did not run. The cold insisted on honesty he could finally accept. Daniel waited in the back booth of a diner that smelled like sugar and rain. He said, "Thank you for meeting me," and watched the window fog with his breath. The recorder on the table felt heavier than metal has any right to be. Maya said, "Start with what can't be explained away," and slid a notebook between the coffee cups. He opened a folder and let silence do the first cut. He said, "Trades executed before embargoed announcements synchronized across shells." She pressed, "Who signed?" He answered, "Approvals routed through a queue that should not exist." The neon flickered like a heartbeat, learning a new rhythm. He said, "My name was placed in the chain to make me collateral." Maya whispered, "That's not an accident. That's design." He showed timelines stitched to headlines like stitches holding a wound shut. She said, "I'll verify, but this is gasoline." He closed the folder and felt the room tilt toward consequence. The lawyer's office overlooked a river that pretended at calm. Ethan said, "If you move forward, you move forever," and set a legal pad down like a runway. Daniel answered, "I can't unknow what I know." Ethan said, "Then we control the blast radius." He outlined protections that sounded like umbrellas in a hurricane. Daniel said, "They forged my initials." Ethan replied, "We prove pattern, then intent." He mapped subpoenas across a whiteboard, drawing arrows like fault lines. Daniel whispered, "They have friends everywhere." Ethan said, "So do the facts when they're arranged right." The room smelled faintly of paper and ozone from a tired printer. Daniel placed the drive on the desk and heard his pulse in the quiet. Ethan said, "I'll contact enforcement tonight," and the decision settled like a gavel no one could unring. The regulators' conference room felt like a ship with no deck. Agent Rivera said, "Tell me what's missing, not what's there," and flipped to a blank page. Daniel answered, "The audit trail ends where a shadow queue begins." She said, "Names." He listed them, each syllable a nail. She asked, "How did your credentials sign on days you were offline?" He said, "My token was cloned." The fluorescent ceiling hummed like a cautionary tale. She said, "Why target you?" He answered, "I noticed distributions that didn't belong in normal variants." She drew a box around a date and tapped twice. He said, "That is when the memo changed." She replied, "I'll need originals and hashes." He slid the drive across the table and felt the floor find his feet again. She said, "You've stepped into federal air now. Breathe carefully." His lungs obeyed, late but grateful. The deposition room was beige by design, as if color could be subpoenaed. Corporate counsel said, "Answer yes or no," and the camera blinked like a bored witness. Daniel said, "Yes," when truth was simple, and "no," when they tried to bend it. They asked, "Did you exceed your authorization?" He answered, "I followed written policy." They pressed, "Did you remove proprietary data?" He said, "I preserved evidence at risk of destruction." His mouth dried into paper. He said they laundered time through side cues and watched a stenographer guard the syllables. Counsel said, "Speculation." He replied, "Correlation backed by log integrity." The room's air froze into edges. He said, "They used me as cover." Someone shifted, a chair confessing more than anyone else did. He kept going because stopping would be a different kind of lie. By night the city sparkled like a lie that forgot its lines. Daniel said, "We go public," and felt the sentence sharpen the air. Maya replied, "I have corroboration and on-record sources." Ethan said, "Then we file concurrently." He opened a secure portal that looked like any other window and felt like a cliff. He uploaded logs, memos, and timelines that had lived under his skin. Maya said, "The story runs at dawn." Ethan said, "The complaint lands first." Daniel whispered, "They will try to erase me." Maya replied, "Then we write your name where bleach can't reach." Ethan added, "And stamp it where the law can't ignore it." The progress bar moved without drama, and the future shifted with it. Daniel exhaled and let the terrible relief take him. He said, "No return," and the city outside finally looked honest. Morning cracked open with headlines that hissed like steam from a ruptured pipe. Daniel said, "It's out," and watched the screen fill with numbers turned into crimes. The story spread across tickers, each crawl a drumbeat he could not mute. Maya said, "You're named as the source," and her voice held steel wrapped in gauze. Ethan said, "Stay off social, answer only through counsel," and the words built a small fence. Phone vibrated until the table seemed alive with nerves. Daniel whispered, "They will come hard now," and the apartment felt an inch smaller. Outside, sirens stitched the city into a single, frayed sentence. A neighbor texted a prayer that read like an obituary with hope. Daniel said, "Let the facts carry me," and poured coffee that tasted like metal. He stood by the window and watched the rain wipe at billboards that refused to blur. He said, "I chose this, and let the weight sit where it belonged." The company moved like a glacier made of knives. A statement appeared that praised integrity and denied everything at once. Victoria said, "We are cooperating fully," and every syllable wore a smile that did not touch bone. Daniel read the line about a rogue employee and felt his name howl without sound. He said, "They will salt the earth," and set the phone face down as if that could darken the sun. Marcus posted a bland defense that smelled like disinfectant. Ethan said, "We anticipated this and filed motions that mapped like scaffolding." Maya said, "Public sympathy leans your way," but the wind was thin and shifting. The market staggered and then pretended to catch itself. Daniel whispered, "They spin while I bleed," and the truth sat stubborn as a stone. He breathed in and let the breath go as if it were someone else's. He said, "Keep moving," and opened the next call sheet. The door buzzed with deliveries he had not ordered, and letters he had expected to avoid. A notice from his bank asked for a friendly review of recent activity. Daniel said, "They shook the branches and pictured invisible hands on every account." A school email requested a meeting that pretended to be routine. His sister said, "We can ride this, but rent wants facts, not feelings." He nodded and packed documents into a folder that felt both shield and burden. A caller threatened litigation in a voice too smooth for daylight. "I know ye," Ethan said, "forward all of it," and his calm built a bridge over rough water. Maya said, more sources flipped and sent a locked file that glowed like a match. Daniel whispered, "Cost is due," and looked at the calendar as if days could lend money. He pressed the folder flat and told fear to wait in the hall. By evening, the city looked like a courtroom with better lighting. News vans crowded the curb, and strangers practiced their angles. Maya said, "We run the follow-up with sourced approvals," and her tone carried careful fire. Agent Rivera said, "Subpoenas issued," and the words clicked like locks sliding into place. Daniel answered, "Then I will show up again," and felt his spine remember its job. A neighbor handed over a casserole with eyes that asked if safety was contagious. He said, "Thank you," and tasted kindness that hurt more than threats. Ethan said, "Expect discovery requests that ask for your soul, and promise to barter only bones." The elevator broke under gossip and kept running anyway. Daniel whispered, "Let this cut reach the artery," and did not look away from the door. He knew the knock would sound polite. He knew it would still be a blow. Night settled like verdict dust. The company's stock shed its shine and steadied in denial. Daniel said, "If justice lands crooked, I still stand straight," and the room accepted the vow without applause. His daughter tiptoed out and offered a drawing of him wearing a cape, that looked stitched by stubborn hope. He said bedtime, hero maker, and tucked the paper into a book that had been waiting for a better chapter. His sister whispered, "We're still here," and set tea beside the laptop as if warmth could file motions. Daniel opened a clean document and began to record the day in lines that could not be argued with. He wrote names, times, and silences that mattered. He said, "Tomorrow we'll ask for more," and saved the file under a title that did not lie. The screen dimmed. The city breathed. He let himself breathe with it. The office lobby smelled like lemon and endings. Daniel said, "This is the last time," and the words steadied his hands. He rode the elevator with a box that held less than his years and more than his nights. Security glanced up, then down, practiced at not seeing a person leave himself behind. He set the box on his desk and slid an envelope under the blotter with a care that felt ceremonial. He whispered, "No dramatics, just truth," and signed the letter that had been living in his ribs. The screens around him displayed markets pretending to be weather. He removed a photo of his daughter with tape still clinging to the corners like fingerprints. Marcus passed the aisle and stopped, then didn't, the pause saying more than mercy. Daniel said, "We're done," to the room that had once taught him to hold his breath. He lifted the box and felt lighter in the way cliffs sometimes do. Night folded around the apartment like a curtain that wouldn't open again. The phone rang with a number he knew and feared. Daniel said, "Pick up," into a room that had run out of answers. The call stopped, then started, a metronome for dread. He let it go to voicemail and listened to silence perform authority. Victoria said, "We can resolve this quietly," and the message dripped with lacquered calm. He answered no one, because some words only exist to erase the ones that matter. Ethan texted, "Do not engage," and the legal tone felt like a hand on his shoulder. Maya wrote, "We stand," and the screen brightened like a small competent flare. Daniel whispered, "I'm not returning to the scene," and watched the phone go dark as if it agreed. The city kept calling in 100 other voices that sounded just like that one. Morning arrived without ceremony, but the drawing on the fridge tried anyway. His daughter said, "You look brave," and he could not argue with crayons. The cape in the picture fluttered the way paper dreams do when taped to metal. He said, "You made me taller," and she answered, "So people can see you from far away." His sister smiled with eyes that had paid in sleepless currency. She said, "Breakfast first, heroic second," and slid toast across a plate like a truce. Daniel touched the drawing and felt steadier than sleep had allowed. He whispered, "I'll keep what we've paid for," and the promise didn't wobble this time. Outside, the street steamed from last night's rain, as if the city had chosen to keep breathing. He folded the lunch bag and tucked a note inside, because hope prefers small pockets. The day waited, not kinder, but honest about its weight. He met Maya and Ethan at the courthouse steps that had measured heavier stories. Maya said, "They filed amended charges up the chain," and the words rang clean. Ethan said, "Your testimony held," and tucked a document into his case like a kept promise. Cameras blinked from the sidewalk, and then lost interest, a kindness dressed as boredom. Daniel said, "Was it worth the scar?" and felt the echo shake less than before. Maya answered, "You stitched a hole in public air," and for once it didn't sound like a headline. Ethan added, "They'll fight," but the floor moved. The wind lifted pages someone had dropped, and they flocked like startled birds. Daniel looked at the door and then away, because not all thresholds are meant for re-entry. He whispered, "It was worth it," and let the sentence stand upright without help. The steps held. The morning did not flinch. Evening drew lines across the river like quiet signatures. Daniel walked the pedestrian bridge and listened to the city practice, forgetting. He said, "Names fade, but outcomes don't," and let the sentence drift toward the water. Behind him, the skyline pulsed, repaired and imperfect. He took the folded resignation copy from his pocket and set it on the rail without ceremony. The wind lifted it, considered mercy, then laid it back down. He whispered, "I kept my name," which did not mean what it used to, and meant more than it had. A barge horn carried the sound of distance doing its job. He turned toward home, not redeemed, not ruined, just accurate. The streetlights blinked awake, and the world continued as if continuation were an act of courage. He walked, and the bridge stayed where it was meant to be,